Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday night edition of the Real Chat Daddy Show. I am your host, Chat Daddy. Glad to be back with you guys on this Monday. Thank you guys so very much for being so understanding on why I was not in on Thursday evening. As I said on Wednesday night show, I have been grieving the death of 8 friends since February, and it's just been a little bit more than I can actually handle. And just needed a little time to breathe, relax, and get myself back together. Thank you so much to all of my friends who hung out with me this weekend to offer me love, support, and encouragement. I had a lot of great things to happen. It was a good weekend, and I'm glad to be back with you guys to continue my nightly show here via Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget, please go over to YouTube and subscribe to the Real Chat Daddy Show. If you do that, it'll help me out a lot. I would appreciate you guys. You will not get anything in the mail. You will not get a vacuum cleaner. You don't have to pay anything. It's absolutely free for you to hit the subscribe button. And the more you hit the subscribe button, the more it helps this show to grow. All right. Same way with Facebook. If you go over to the Real Chat Daddy Show on Facebook, you'll find the show right there. Please like the page. Do me a favor, start a share, watch party, do whatever it is that you do to encourage your other friends to come in and join the conversation tonight. As you all know, we're in the midst of my Hotter Than July series, Chat Daddy's Hotter Than July conversation series. And so our very special guest co-hosts are back with us again tonight. They've been here with us every Monday during the month of July. And we've been talking about worldwide information for all humanity. How can we improve? How can we get better? The first Monday night, we just talked about us as a people. The second Monday was all about our economics and finance, which was just an amazing conversation. And then tonight we're talking about colorism. We are, believe it or not, a lot of us come from families where there may be lighter siblings and darker siblings. And believe it or not, that's a huge problem. And it has been a problem with our race of people for a very long time. I have some really fascinating stories to tell of my grandparents and how the color line played a huge part. Remember, if you were darker than a paper sack, you was too black. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? It really is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring in our very special co-host tonight. We just love and adore these ladies. These ladies have been my friend now for roughly almost a year, but here's the deal. I met these two beautiful ladies. They both are just academic geniuses. I love our conversation and our dialogue. We decided to create a dialogue of just very compassionate people wanting to talk about issues that affect us the most. Our first co-host tonight, she is back. She is Alicia L. Ross. Well, hello there. How are you?
Hi, Chad. Good to see you. Good to be here. I am enjoying the summer as best as I can during this environment. Yes. I am, just enjoying times, with reflection, times, communicating with family and friends, and overall just loved ones. So good to be here to have our serious talk tonight.
Wonderful. Your hair looks great tonight. You look good. You do.
Thank you. And so you look very
handsome. Thank you. I got to get my wig tightened up tomorrow. It's time. I got a lot coming up this week. So yes, thank you so much. Let's add in our other co-hosts. People don't realize we're a trio on Monday nights. And our third and final co-host is never least, though. She is always just amazing. Always powerful dialogue. We love and respect and adore her in so many ways. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show, Dr. Carol Collins. And here we go, Ayalaja. Yay!
Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hey, Dr. Carol, how are you this evening?
Fine, glad to be here.
Good. How was your weekend? You look amazing too. Your hair's on fleek too. Look, right.
What did I say? Well, this is a little of that. It's called the brush with the part, right? The natural brush to the side with the part. Always natural. Always natural. It was a okay weekend. Trying to just continue to plow through with some of my, responsibilities. Trying to stay positive in the midst of what we're experiencing, and always trying to just spread love and receive love. What can I say? So this is part of that.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm excited to have you ladies back tonight. And Alicia, I want you to tell the audience, just to give them a taste, a sample of what we're going to be talking about later on this evening so that they can prepare their palates for this wonderful conversation on colorism.
Right. Thank you, Chet. The three of us started this conversation together last fall when we were on WVON, talking about colorism. And there were several things that the three of us shared, both about our personal lives, but also within our society as a whole. But also colorism, not just nationally, but internationally as well. And then, tonight we want to get deeper into that conversation, talk about things in relation to media images, both past and current. And then also how some of our brothers and sisters, younger ones, have been affected in the education system, including the young sister, Karis Rogers, who started her online and also her clothing apparel in support of who she is as a beautiful, beautiful girl of a darker hue, but in overall supporting hues of all colors within our community in particular. So I look forward to having this conversation with you all.
Okay, very good. Well, ladies, you look Hollywood ready. Our audience is building up. People are putting comments up already. The one and only Chat Daddy. I love this show. Thank you so much. Here's another hello, Art. And Leslie McKinney, who was actually in the studio. She was my co-host that night, I think it was, when we had the conversation on colorism at WVON. And so she's tuned in with us tonight. And here's the funniest thing. She's going to be my co-host tomorrow night. So it all works out. Yeah. It does. Well, ladies, I'm so glad to have you here. And I want to start into hot topics so we can cover those tonight and be able to get through them. So today, number 45, President Donald Trump actually acknowledged a big flare-up of COVID-19 cases has happened. As we all know, the numbers are increasing across the country. ICUs are absolutely filled, and we're back at that level of we don't know whether to close down, restrict a few things. He actually had a mask on in a tweet. And so, ladies, with you both being educators, you both being very bright women, we've talked about this thing of going back to school. And then my question is, why did it take our president so long to realize that this COVID-19 situation really is a hot mess situation, and it probably will get worse before it gets better?
Well, I think that anytime you have something that is potentially devastating to the community on many levels, socially, economically, physically, psychologically, there should always be a cautious stance. And for us to be in a situation where we're backpedaling is of concern to me. And it makes me wonder, what was the impetus for trying to move so fast? Now, with all due respect to the economic needs of the community, some of the concern about the financial aspects of community coming to a halt, anyone knows that the health of a community is first and foremost of concern. Because without the health of the community, there are no financial aspects of the community. There are no familial aspects. There is no education. So I think that we are in a situation where instead of having the level of humility to take a look at our neighbors around the world, how they were handling certain situations, those that had taken an aggressive stance, I think that perhaps the attitude was that of invincibility, which is of great concern to me. And I don't think that fares well in the impression of the United States from the global aspect.
All right. What do you feel, Dr. Ross? What is your take on the situation and these numbers that he claimed? It's all about the dollar.
It has been about the dollar. I mean, we are a capitalist society as well as other societies around the country. And it was a shock to actually, for our country, to have to say we have to shut down society to a certain degree. That's something that we have not dealt with, since 1918. That is something that we were not prepared for mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and then of course physically as it reflects on our assets. And I know that naturally that was part of the issue, with people receiving what was going on, both from federal administration on down, locally within our own families. And we still, for some reason, some of the administrators obviously did not receive it. We have had this mentality within our country that we're invincible, forgetting that we're just as human as any other country, as any of the third world countries, quote unquote third world countries, I would say, that have experienced many devastations for centuries. And we did not believe that we would have to face something of this stature ever. Some people did. Of course, there was preparation that was put in place from several of the administrations prior to this as it related to pandemics. But when you're dealing with personalities that, that want to focus only on what it is they're doing or could do or should do, as opposed to leaning on administrations and basically colleagues, colleagues who have gone through this process, who have put together, a pandemic plan, a potential pandemic plan. When you're not listening and you're not being open to that, that is what can cause and has caused a lot of the problems that we're facing. And I remember clearly there was this video that went around from Italy. And remember, it was in either late March or early April, and they filmed people from various different places around Italy, and the people were in their homes, and they were saying, "You have to take this seriously. This is real." And they kept pleading to us specifically, the Americans, because they knew, how we are. We have not faced something like this in decades, and there's like, please take it seriously. And I remember that clearly, watching that, and and some of us did, but many did not.
Yes, that's right. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not taking this serious. Every day I take a photo of myself with my matching mask and whatever my shirt that I have on, but you guys better believe I do not leave out of this house without a mask. Most of the time, if I'm sharing a vehicle with somebody, I try to have a mask on. I've only accepted invitations to do al fresco dining because, I just think being in the air and in the open, Lord knows I have a bag full of sanitizer, wipes. I've become extra OCD. Because I was that way before, but I am getting back out and enjoying myself. I had lunch with somebody today and said, wow, this is probably the best summer I've had in years, despite the unfortunate situation that we're currently in. But then our young demographic is not seeing the danger that they're putting us all in.
Right. I agree. And that comes from the communication that we received. We received communication that it does not affect the younger generation, and then it barely affects the younger generation, that they can be asymptomatic and pass it on to others. But, by that time in their minds, as we saw with, some of the people who actually went on spring break to Florida, is the common thing that many young people do in college. They had in their mind what was initially told, that they cannot get this. And at that time, therefore, it was hard to turn it around and say that actually you can be affected in one way or the other if you're not being careful. So so I think those are some of the other mistakes that happened in the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Dr. Carol, did you want to add something to that piece that we're talking about?
I think Alicia said it all. I think she said it all.
Right. Yes. Very good. All right. Well, ladies, let me give you the latest Illinois COVID-19 update. The state of Illinois has reported as of today, we have 1,173 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. This now brings the state total number of cases to 162,748. State officials said that we had 6 more fatalities after, as a result of COVID-19 virus. And so far, that brings our death total in Illinois to 7,301 people who have perished. And as I said to you guys before, as of this Friday, bars will not be allowed to serve alcohol if they are not a part of a dining establishment already. So if you are a lounge or a bar and you just serve, cocktails, you will have to shut that down. And a lot of these places have just opened back up. There'll be a limited amount of people in fitness classes, and that means no more than 10 people per fitness class. And there will be no more services where you have to remove your mask. So let's say, i.e., shave here, a facial, eyebrows, you can keep your mask on, but anything that would require you to take your mask off, these services will now be squashed. And did we see this coming or not? I mean, we've been seeing it in other states. We were extremely cautious of opening back up. But did we see this coming? Dr. Carroll, did you have any inkling that this was going to come again? You kind of alluded in your last statement that you thought it was coming again.
Yes, I think that we took a hasty approach in many ways. And it's kind of a situation where, of course, Chad and Alicia, issues of economic trees were definitely at the forefront. The concern about the American economy. But again, when you think about even trends, how they flow into this country, often they come in through the coasts, they move to the center of the country. So that's why when things come through California, Florida, New York, they then come to the center. And if you notice, even with our virus, it seemed to do that too. Yep. Where it came very strong in New York. It was strong in Seattle. Then the next thing you know, it's come into places like Detroit, Chicago. And I've even read reports of the concern about rural America, whereby moving out of the cities into the rural spaces. So I'm not surprised at all, especially with the ease of transportation throughout the United States of America. We're not in a society where there's checkpoints and individuals aren't able to travel from territory to territory. It's a very, very fluid country. Right. So yes, the idea of now knowing that we are back in a rise environment does not surprise me. I think that the overall narrative was not a united narrative from the beginning, where there was a clear statement that this is what the United States will do. It seems to me that individual governors and mayors were trying to speak on behalf of the needs of their community. And there was not a one speak. That is often important, especially in times of tragedy, when there needs to be a strong, unified statement. Yeah. I didn't see that. So we had our mayors who were much at the forefront saying, I'm not going to allow this to happen. Other mayors who may have had other ideas about it, governors, and unfortunately it seemed like it rolled along some political line instead of a human line, which is let's save American lives, make sure Americans are well taken care of in a time when we know that the real intricacies of the virus are not known. It's evidence that there were some unanswered questions, because I firmly believe, Chad, that had there been more answered questions, the conversation on the status of the virus, the conversation on vaccines would be more robust as we talk right now. As we see. It seems to me there probably still some strong unanswered questions about the nature of this virus and how it operates. And with that environment, it should have been a very cautious stance and much more centered on the human element. And I do commend those organizations in those states and those mayors and those governors who thought in that way. But overall, that should, in my opinion, as an American citizen, should have been the stance from the federal level.
All right, I agree with you on that 100%. We have a comment from an audience member. I'm concerned about sending my daughter to college, and I hope they go online because I don't want to be the bad guy and make her stay home. Thank you, Stella. We appreciate you for that comment. Lady, Dr. Carol, you're in that higher education. I call you Dr. Ross now because I believe I'm claiming it. But
it's coming soon.
I know a lot of people right now that are very nervous, not about the elementary school and high school student, but that college student that's going to venture off into the world for the first time. First of all, you got to cut those strings. And secondly, you're sending your baby out in a global pandemic, or your babies if you're sending several off to college. Who wants to go first on the remarks about whether or not how this lady should handle the college situation?
Well, I know Carol's in the system now. I have been previously, but what do you think, Carol? And what are you seeing with your students in your institution?
I think that the institutional leaders are taking a very, very long, hard look at the needs of the students. I commend the college presidents that I've had the opportunity to hear from. I know that their plan is active, very much centered on supporting the needs of students. High-level officials at universities are collaborating in and around the needs of college-level students. So I do believe that the organizations are fully aware of the what ifs. At the same time, they're fully dedicated to ensuring that the students have a good, solid college experience and that it's a quality experience. So this is no easy charge. I would say to our caller, I would say to her that the organizations that I'm familiar with are open to hearing from parents. They're open to the concerns of parents. And if she has a concern about the viability of her child on that campus, I think that she should initiate a dialogue so she can become more aware of what the particular steps are going to be at the college that her child attends. And also she can voice what she might think is the best solution.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, Carol. I mean, I've worked, I work in the university system, but it's been a little while. But what I have done with my current coworker, who has been concerned because this year is her son's sophomore year, and her son and some of his friends just rented an apartment that they plan on moving into this fall. I think it's going to be about 4 or 5 of them. And I said, I think one of the best things to do as, because they will be going back to school at this particular institution and not doing online learning as of yet. We know things could change in August for everyone as far as the education systems are concerned. But my suggestion to her, for those who are, who may be in a similar situation with students who are sharing housing, is have a conference, a Zoom conference, web conference, whatever tool that you're using to bring the parents and those students together to talk about what will be those safety measures that they're going to take in the home, outside of home, to protect themselves, within the home, and again, just individually. But also, if they are going to go to school, they're going to come back home. And they're coming back home to parents of varying age groups, young children, varying age groups, people who have various different health concerns. And I said, so you all should, my suggestion was to her is you communicate beforehand what are those safety measures that they're going to take, and then how they're going to, what are the safety measures that they're going to take as they begin to prepare to come back home for the holidays as they come upon them. So I think that, obviously there are so many things to consider. Yes, when you're thinking about your child going away to school, whether they're staying in a dormitory or whether they're staying off campus with friends or whether they're staying off campus with family members. Because some schools are still doing a hybrid and are requiring some of the students to to be close by. So I think, as we mentioned before, I don't believe there isn't one solution for all of the institutions, all of the districts, and it does depend on the location, rural, urban settings, and so forth. So, I thank Carol for sharing some of the things that are happening at her institution and other institutions that she's familiar with, because it is a dialogue that parents need to have, because we're talking a lot about the secondary and primary schools, but we do need to talk more about the universities as well. So best wishes to you, the parent who actually sent the message, and other parents who are trying to navigate this as it relates to universities, my family members as well.
Well, you know what's so interesting, ladies, is that I had no idea this would be a conversation that would even come up. But I was having a talk with a friend of mine that is really heavy into real estate. And she was saying that 4 or 5 years ago, the thing was that people were buying multi-bedroom condos for their college students, so that the college students could get their friends to live there. A lot of times, they would collect enough rent money that the condo mortgage would be paid, and the student that lived there would be able to have some pocket money, that type of thing. Now, the number one most requested thing of college students going off to college are studios and 1-bedroom units because of this pandemic. And there will soon be a shortage of studios and 1-bedrooms because nobody wants to share with anybody. If you really don't know who's in here, and again, other people's behavior of how they would do it. You know how the college thing is. I might still be a good Christian boy that stays in and go to bed, but then you might have that roommate that might be the, town tramp or whatever. I mean, so you don't know. And so that sparks a lot of people to start thinking about, will this, once they go off to school, start a whole pandemic on their campus, or, the spread of the virus on their campuses.
Right. And as we mentioned, I think last week, it was noted that specifically University of Alabama, college students were having quote unquote, I hate to even say it, COVID parties.
Wasn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's ridiculous, but it goes back to your original question and comment about what happened basically and what could we have done differently.
Right. And when you really think about it, in a lot of, like Dr. Carol, your universities in a more small rural, area, really how many studios or 1-bedrooms would be available? And then in college towns, they build these places, for multiple roommates. Am I right or wrong about that, Dr. Carol?
Well, traditionally, in larger state institutions, yes, the rooms are probably more geared toward more than one student. In some of the private institutions, there may be the singles. So I'm sure that the institutions and the leadership are taking into account what are the safest ways of proceeding in this time so that students can live comfortably, but also safely. I have great faith in the institutions of which I'm familiar. I've seen some of the documentation. I know that there are some very clear and well-articulated rollout plans, and the option for families to gain more information and become comfortable or learn about the strategies that are there. So again, I encourage the caller that had interest in terms of what the options are for her child to not be at all afraid of making that contact with student resident life, or even if it were to be some of the other higher level officers, even the office of the president. I'm sure that individual, the woman, would be referred to the correct people who could tell her what the plan is and what the options are. I do have a lot of faith in those planning teams in higher education. And I know that at the heart of everything is the well-being of the students and of the professors and other employees on the campuses.
Very good. All right, ladies. Well, outstanding job on that. Before we continue on with our topic of the evening, we do want to acknowledge the fact that we lost 2 civil rights giants over the weekend. We found out about the passing of Representative John Lewis, as well as C.T. Vivian. These gentlemen are now ancestors of ours, but they left a legacy like you would not believe. Civil rights icon and U.S. Representative John Lewis. He was in hospice care, and he passed away at the age of 80. As you guys all know, a Democrat, he played a key role in the civil rights movement and marched with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in 1965 in Selma, Alabama. And just a wonderful life. And then we'll talk about Mr. C.T. Vivian in just a moment. Ladies, is there anything that you want to say about the life and times of John Lewis? Who would like to go first?
Well, I'll say, as with all of us, I appreciate, respect, and am grateful for his contribution to us as a community, as an African-American community, but also as an American community, and within and internationally, right, as well, because the things that he did affected everyone across the board, which is why he is being honored and beloved. The love is being shown and shared across the nation. I had the opportunity to meet him, to hear him speak when he was promoting his book. It was March, and March it's kind of like a comic book, but talks about some of his experiences. And I had that experience. With my job, they actually have, community programs and events, and they invited him to our community. And it was an amazing experience hearing him, being able to ask him questions. I was amazed when he came closer. We were sitting in the front, and I just felt, I actually posted this today, and I said, I felt like this light, just coming over as he was coming over to answer directly in our faces, the questions that we asked, and that just showed, his still being connected to the people, no matter who the people are, but specifically with us, wanting to directly look in our eyes, talk with us, answer our questions, and let us know that he is still the pioneer. We have he proposed recently this new Civil Rights Act, and I know that his colleagues are looking to have it in his name, as it is being proposed again, as he tried to push it before. So prayerfully, that is something that will happen, both the act, and the reconstituting of that, and then also putting in his name. Of course, there's more, as we all know, including Elder Lewis, that there's more to be done as far as voting rights are concerned for all of us, people of color, and in particular African Americans. But I was in awe when I saw him. I'm in awe of his history, of his legacy, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that he was here. And he did the things that he did in government. And as I listened to some of the people on the news, or on some of the people who are interviewing his friends, people who've known him for 50, 60 years, he seems like he was a great person, a great friend, a great husband, and so yeah, grateful for his presence. Mm-hmm.
You want to add something to that as well, too?
Chad, I'd like to say that thanks, Alicia, for recalling your story about when you met him. It's powerful. I'd like to say to this generation, those who are in their 30s, perhaps moving into age 40 and under, those who see themselves at let's say, the forefront of some of the issues that we're facing today. And I'd like to say to them that do not turn your back on those leaders from the 20th century.
Yeah.
Find out as much as you can about those that came before. When we think about the 20th century, we think about an era where there were major conflicts: World War I, World War II, Vietnam. There was major legislation that advanced the lots of African Americans in very, very significant ways, and actually catapulted decolonization in Africa, catapulted liberation efforts for Latin Americans, liberation efforts for women. African Americans were very much at the forefront of that. And people like Representative Lewis were at the forefront of that. All right. I think that when we think of our major iconic leaders, whether it be Dr. King, whether it be Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, whether it be Nelson Mandela, I can go on and on and on. Fannie Lou Hamer. These were 20th century leaders. And as we look at what has happened recently with the murder of Mr. Floyd, issues of police brutality, racial profiling, etc., and inequities, I really say to our younger leaders today, please look back at your history. Let's not take the stance that we know it all. Nothing is really new under the sun. And there's so much to be learned from the ancestors. And that's what I would say to all those young folks out there that say, who was he, who cares? And there are some who are saying that. Take a look back. Sankofa, go back and fetch it.
Oh, I love it. I do. All right, well, I want to talk about the life and times of the late, great Mr. C.T. Vivian. His legal name was Cordy Tinsdale Vivian. He was born in 1924 and actually would have had a birthday July 30th, but he passed July 17th of this year. And as you guys all know, he was a minister, author, close friend, and confidant to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement, known for just many wonderful things. I can't believe that we would lose two pioneers like that. He worked with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with the struggle for racial equality, and tonight we're going to talk about color and racism. And he was instrumental in desegregation in Nashville, also in efforts in places like Selma and right here in Chicago. And keep in mind, he was the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his close to 7 decades of his work that he did for mankind. So another great gentleman that is gone way too soon as well, too. Would any of you ladies like to make a comment about the late, great C.T. Vivian?
I want to acknowledge there was someone that just made a comment. I saw that he actually was at St. Sabina several times. It's posted, Watika. And that's great. You know, I know we've had several great people that have come through St. Sabina. And, you know, he is one of the great ones. I know, you know, as a confidant, as I've learned recently, you know, he was Martin Luther King Jr.'s lieutenant, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. And so therefore he knew the ins and outs, and I'm sure, you know, being able to sit down and talk with him, he would share stories, but of course, maybe keep some. But, you know, I echo what Carol said. We have to know who our pioneers are. We have to recognize who they are. You know, Elder Elijah Cummings passed away, you know, earlier this year, last year. And I think that it's important that we know who these people are before they leave us, so that we can understand their legacy, and we can understand therefore why people are feeling the way they feel, why they are doing the things that they do. And some of the things that they're doing is not new, you know, with the peaceful protest. And there are others, you know, who set this course way before they were even thought of, and have faced even harsher treatment prior to now. And then perhaps, you know, again, as Carol said, learning even strategies on how to do that peacefully. And also, you know, it's a mental thing as well. And as we think about, you know, how it's a mental thing, you know, when we're educating ourselves, we're also putting in that information and we're able to stand a little taller knowing who these elders are and who they were. So I echo Carol's sentiments as far as our elders are concerned overall. And grateful for Reverend Vivian's service to our community, specifically to our country, and as highlighted, of course, internationally.
I love it. I do. Dr. Carol, I'm sure you'd like to add something to that.
Mm-hmm. Just want to reiterate, Chad, that there's so much need for us to recognize the connectivity that exists in our life cycle, that we're nothing new. Everything runs in cycles. Everything runs in cycles. And I know that we often talk about youth of today, and we ask, do they still have that respect for the elders, especially in the African American community? With the exposure to the internet and some of the saturation of other, perhaps the dominant culture and some of the ways of knowing and doing, we sometimes ask our African American children, have you forgotten some of the elements of what has allowed us to rise out of bondage? And that has been a great respect for our elders and a desire to keep connected with those of wisdom. I can remember growing up in the 70s and the 80s and sitting around with my grandfather and hearing the messages, sitting around with my mother and father and listening to the music, hearing the stories. As I reflect on my own life, I'm so grateful. Although I wasn't able to see civil rights, I was a beneficiary of civil rights. But having my sisters who are 10 and 14 years older than me tell me what it was like the day that Dr. King was assassinated and how they had to be rushed out of their so-called integrated schools, things of that nature. I mean, that is powerful history. And I would say today, especially at this time, when we are having this level of awareness, or let's just say a focus on issues of inequity, we must go back as an African American community and fetch it. Anyone who calls his or herself a leader today should not operate in isolation thinking that they've got the master plan. They need to do some research. They need to find out. It doesn't mean they have to necessarily duplicate the ways of those 60s leaders of the previous century. But on the other hand, they need to be able to study and say, what worked? What didn't work? How is our context different? How is it the same? I think anything other than that, we're going to lead ourselves down a road that's not going to be very productive.
Oh, I love it. I do. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you so much. All right. So listen, everybody, if you're just joining us, welcome to the Monday night edition of the Real Chat Daddy Show. I am your host, our Chat Daddy Sims. Glad to be back with you guys. I took Thursday night off. As I said last week on the Wednesday night show, I've suffered 8 personal deaths since February. None of my friends and family members that have passed away, they did not die from COVID. They all died from just everything from accidents to health issues to just things you just wouldn't believe. And it's been very trying on me. And so I'm back tonight with like these 2 beautiful ladies, my dear friends. We come up with this series every Monday night where we talk about things that affect us most as a race of people. And we do this in hopes that other people learn about us. And also it will help to spark a dialogue between you, your friends, and your colleagues. And it's all about love, happiness, and good energy. I am honored to have these ladies here. They've agreed that each Monday night during the month of July, we would talk about something different. And tonight, later on in the show, we're going to talk about colorism and the role it plays in our society in this day and age. As you guys all know, my co-host tonight is Alicia L. Ross. I'm calling her Dr. Ross. But the real Ross doctor is Dr. Carol Collins. And getting better, baby. Getting better. I have to break it down, but I did it. These 2 ladies are absolutely incredible. I just love and adore them both. Right now, we're doing hot topics, and we just spoke on the death of the late, great C.T. Vivian, as well as U.S. Representative John Lewis. 2 of our iconic civil rights leaders passed away Saturday. and it has left a tremendous hole in our hearts. And the tributes have been just absolutely wonderful this evening. And ladies, your comments about the men have been great as well too. If you don't mind, ladies, I want to move on to some more entertainment, and then we're going to close this all out by talking about Nick Cannon, because it actually, the whole Nick Cannon story plays a big part in colorism as well too. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah. We want to talk about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's throw some hotness in here first. Our girl Nicki Minaj announced on her Instagram that she is a pregger. The 37-year-old rapper showed her baby bump off in a tiny bikini and a caption that read "pregger." Minaj, who is married to Kenneth Zoo Petty, who is her, wonderful husband. She had sparked some speculation about her pregnancy back in May, when she kind of alluded to some food cravings and feeling nauseous. Her fans and friends had all been waiting for this moment to announce it. She has announced it. She's done her fame photo to show you the baby bump. And so, recently she announced her retirement to start a family. And so we are very proud of Miss Nicki Minaj. I like it like that, Miss Nicki Minaj. So yes, ladies, anything you want to say about Miss Minaj and her pregnancy?
Congratulations, Nikki. You did it. You're sitting tight. You're focused. You accomplished the things it seems like that you wanted to accomplish. And all the best to you. God bless to you and your whole family.
Yes, we are very excited. All right, Dr. Carol, anything you want to say?
Well, I think that Nikki just embodies a woman that's made some choices. She's chosen the way she wanted to perform. She's chosen the image she chose to portray throughout her career, and she's chosen to become a mother. And I think that she's one model, not necessarily a model that everyone would want to follow, but not a model that everyone will reject either. She is a notable personality. I would say to all of the young women out there to choose wisely the way in which they want to do it. But as far as Nikki, I think that it's fabulous that in this time of this world and where we are in evolution, that she can make some choices that best fit her lifestyle.
That's right. Yes. All right. Well, we wish you the best, Nicki Minaj. We look forward to seeing what your new baby will be, whether it's a boy or girl, twins, triplets, who knows? It's Nicki Minaj now. So yeah, and then I can't wait to see what the baby's name's gonna be. So that's a whole another story. All right. So our last entertainment or news story will help us to transition into our conversation tonight with colorism. And so Dr. Ross, I'm gonna resort back to you, dear, to lead us into the Nick Cannon conversation, because I feel bad for Nick Cannon. First of all, he lost the position, and then there were rumors on social media this weekend where he alluded that he wanted to leave this earth, and I kind of get that. Sometimes you say, listen, beam me up, Scotty. I'm sick of these folks on this level, but you're just saying it out of sarcasm, where a lot of people thought maybe it was a plea for help or that he might be considering suicide, which we hope he is not. We want to keep Tamar Braxton in our prayers as well, too. But can you help the audience to kind of understand what's going on with Nick Cannon? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the information about Nick Cannon, the news, and the comments that he made, he was, I believe it was a show with Professor Griff, on a YouTube show that Professor Griff has. And he was responding to a series of questions and commentary and dialogue that they were having. And he made the comment, specifically what was alarming for the people who were listening and in his employers, was that he said that, Black people are how can he be anti-Semitic if because Black people are Semitic, Black people are Jews. And I understand that from what I read, that the concern wasn't just that he made that comment, that he was on the show with Professor Griff and who made the comment. Professor Griff is from Public Enemy. And then also they were, as I was reading, they were concerned that he has supported Minister Louis Farrakhan as well, which a lot of people say, have said over the years is anti-Semitic. And I think that, so that is those were the facts. And then therefore he was let go from the CBS Viacom position. But I understand Fox made a statement that they have communicated with him because he hosts the Masked Singer show.
Yes.
And they made a statement that he is still on the show. They've been in communication with him, that they do not tolerate bigotry of any kind, is what they said, Fox, in regards to Nick Cannon and his comments. And then, Nick apologized, and said that, he has a better understanding what, the Jewish community, and I'm assuming he's probably talking the various different sects of, SECT of the Jewish communities, both modern as well as historical.
Right.
So I'm sure, and he was thanking some of the rabbis that he had spoken with and thanking them for not condemning him, but for educating him on what their faith is, what their culture is, and in their history, and currently. So those are the things that I read. When I heard that there may have been a suicide attempt, that those are some of the ramblings that were going on this weekend. Yes, anybody, when we're under pressure, we feel like, oh my gosh, stop the world. I want to get off, right? So I'm hoping, like you said, Chat, that was what, basically his sentiment, and he just publicly put it out there. He put it out there. But and hoping that he understands, therefore, that we all feel, stop the world, I want to get off. Carol, yourself, and myself, we've been involved in many different things, professionally, personally, and as you mentioned, Chat, with the passing of your loved ones, and Carol last year with her mom, and myself, we all have been through stuff. But we have to continue to push forward. Nick Cannon has been a voice. He was, worked at Nickelodeon for many, many years. He was, the star child, if you will, of Nickelodeon. And I've seen some of those shows that he's hosted, and he's great at what he does. And I want him to know that you can't give up. You're just getting started. Just getting started. Pause, maybe, not just because of this, because of whatever else may have been going on. I understand, he already has an illness, autoimmune or something of that nature. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
But just step back. And because this is the time, right? He's in his early 40s. This is the time when you actually step back. You reevaluate your comings and goings, career-wise, socially, etc. And you say, and I also believe I know in the past he used to talk about being a believer of God. And so therefore, this is the time to step back and say, okay, what am I supposed to do next? He still has his job as the Masked Singer host, and I'm sure other things that he's working on. But overall, what is my purpose? What is the voice that I am supposed to have now, for the next X amount of years? What are those next projects? Because we like seeing him on the screen. He's fun. He's funny. He's a handsome guy, right?
Yes, he is.
Right? But he has given a lot to the younger audiences as well as his peers and those who are older. Because because of the way that he presented himself from the very beginning, when he was a child actor and in the public eye from being a child. So I hope that he just steps back and has that relationship with God and just sits down and say, okay, what do I need to do? what is the message I need to get out, and how do I get it out, and whom do I communicate it to, or what platform do I communicate that message? And that's my feedback.
All right, Dr. Kelly, you want to chime in on that at all?
Well, yes, Alicia, thank you, because Alicia has a more in-depth understanding of what occurred. I've only partially followed the story, but there's a few things that come to my mind. Mm-hmm. And one is that, of course, under no circumstances would any community support anti-Semitism, none whatsoever.
Right.
But as I hear the story, the questions I have are in and around, is it Nick's statement about the original Jews and the fact that he may have indicated they were African? Or is it his affiliation? Or, I mean, there's several questions I have that I would have to probably do a deeper dive to understand. But I think it warrants an opportunity really to understand what was considered the most offensive part of what was said, because we do know that those who are Jews come from all over the world. And there are African Jews and non-European Jews. So my question would be, is that the nature of the statement, or was it much more stinging than that, what was said? And if that is the case, I think that what we would need to do is we would need to see if there are options for some sort of reconciliation and dialogue.
Okay.
And what I'm saying to that is, when I say that, I'm saying when we make statements, or anyone makes statements that are offensive, first and foremost, they need to understand fully what makes them offensive. All right. So in that particular case, I would hope that would have been part of the dialogue with the community. Exactly what was offensive and why the reaction was as stinging as it was to the community, first and foremost. And secondly, then I think it should be about what does it take to reconcile? Because as a member of the African American community, I've seen over and over again disrespectful, stinging things said about Black people. And Black people don't control the media. They don't own Viacom. They don't have that ability, perhaps, to remove someone from their job. And perhaps that is not the case. I know that there's a lot of presence of Jewish people have a strong presence in the media. All right. So I think first and foremost, there must be, we do not tolerate anti-Semitism. What is exactly what it was said and what makes it offensive, if in fact he didn't understand. All right. And the reason I say this is because looking at Nick Cannon's history, he's been so appealing to so many people of all races. Nick Cannon's very popular. All right. And if I think about his work, I think about work that has been very, very uniting in a lot of ways, his shows and the way young people have responded to his work. So if he did make that mistake, he has apologized. He needs to know exactly what needs to be done further to build the relationship further in a positive way. But I would hope if in fact he is in an emotional state, that's when I'd like to see members of the Jewish community to reach out to and say, perhaps we need to help this young man get out of this state. I mean, this is a society of each one reach one. And even when pain has been inflicted, and the reason I'm saying this, Chad and Alicia, is so often the African American community has actually embraced those who have oppressed the community. And said, we'll work with you. We've just talked about Dr. King. We talked about the nonviolent stance. Even in the midst of the oppressors, the focus was being nonviolent. We also know that the gentleman, if I recall, who was confronted in the park and was the woman called saying that a Black man was in the park threatening her. I do recall that I read that he doesn't even want her to undergo the humiliation of a trial and all of that. Am I correct with that?
The bird watcher, the famous bird watcher, and yes.
Bird watcher saying no, we're not going to have her put under that level of stress. Right. That's what I would hope I would see. perhaps from those rabbis, or members of the African American community who could meet with Nick, with rabbis, discuss some of the perhaps wounds that exist between the two communities. But I would definitely hope that he would not be abandoned at this time, because that to me would be contradictory to what we do when we're loving communities working together to be more cohesive and to understand each other better.
Yes. Ladies,
I do see that one of your viewers indicated that he did meet with the rabbis. That's fabulous. He did. And then I would hope that maybe now could create a web, because we have great respect for rabbis and their spiritual understandings, the strength of the rabbis. Maybe that could create a web around him if he is in fact fragile. Joining with Nick, saying, Nick, we know that you made this mistake. We're here for you, along with whatever Nick's faith may be. But to have this young man out there hanging is of concern for me, if in fact he is at that point. That would be a tragedy and a travesty to see something happen.
Yes, it would. You know, Doc, I'm going to share something with both of you ladies. I was in a work situation where a young lady, fresh out of college, her first job, that type of thing, we were having a discussion about the Jewish holiday, and she said, well, I don't get it. Oh, I didn't know Jewish people had, holidays, and, you get to be off work, and here's the deal. If I had said that as a grown Black man, HR would have been dragging me out of there, and I'd have been in Nick Cannon's situation. But because she was a young white girl from Hootersville who had never experienced Jewish people before, everybody kind of laughed it off and grabbed a bagel and said, moving on. And so it just makes me wonder whether or not has Nick Cannon been fully informed about Jewish life. I know he hangs with Minister Farrakhan, things like that. So it just makes me wonder, how much knowledge did he have prior to about the Jewish community before the statement was made? A lot of times, younger people hear things that rappers say, poets say, wordsmiths. So I'm just curious about that. Any comment?
And that's
Alicia.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually referring back to something that you mentioned earlier, Carol, that is why we have to know our history. Our elders within our society, within our community, and the history and the things that they have done within our community. And I mean, those of our hue and other hues as well. We have to continue to educate ourselves, especially right now. While the button is hot, if you will, as far as Black Lives Matter is concerned. Well, what are the historical things that have led us to this point? And if you are a public figure, do your research, do thorough research. I don't know if he has or he hasn't. I did read the article, and it did say, that he is learning from others about the Jewish community, and perhaps again what he's learning is he's learning their different sects, again SECT, of the Jewish community, both from biblical times as well as modern day, and therefore referencing what Carol said, Jews of all hues and all nationalities. And so those are deeper discussions, and perhaps that is what he was alluding to, but did not use the platform to first explain what he was talking about. Because, so there are a lot of extensive conversations, but to talk anything negative about the community, it is wrong. And then therefore, of course, acknowledging the fact that, there's just a lot of history, a lot of positive history. But therefore, there's a lot of history from biblical times on up about the Jewish community that, would be great. And perhaps that's what he means. He's learning from the rabbis and others who are helping to educate him further on the community.
It's a very spiritual, such a spiritual, powerful opportunity, Chad and Alicia. when we have misunderstandings, to be encapsulated by a rabbi, whatever Nick's faith, if he practices a traditional perhaps faith, whatever his belief systems are, to be encapsulated by that particular leader, if there is a leader in his walk, is powerful. Anytime we come and have opportunities where our misunderstandings can lead to cohesive relationships, it's a good thing. And as a person who has very close Jewish friends, we've talked about the various origins of their culture, whether it be Eastern Europe, whether it be Germany, whatever it may be, and also places like Ethiopia and some of those communities. And I think that not knowing the details, if that conversation had been done in a way that was comfortable and fruitful and all parties involved, it would probably have been a different outcome. And as Alicia said, historically, we do know there's diversity in that faith in terms of where Jews originate from. I just think that it could have been a misunderstanding. And now there's a time for some serious healing. So if we were to say in conclusion of this particular matter that we have a young, talented African-American man, potentially self-destructive, that is not acceptable. Not when we've had opportunity to try to come to some powerful healing. We're in a particular situation where we're talking about healing across this world. How could he be left out there, not feeling like he can heal? If we're in a situation where we're all turning the cheek, and we've got multiple Hughs out there marching with Black Lives Matter, who may not have been marching Black Lives Matter 6 months ago, I would hope the same would stand for Nick Cannon, that he would be able to have that level of support if in fact he needed that support, that we're all there to learn more about each other and to right some of the wrongs. I would hope that would be allotted him.
Very good. I couldn't agree with you more. I'll say this, ladies, the one thing that I love about the life that I've lived, when you are in the airline industry and you work with first-class passengers, there's an extensive training on how to deal with multicultural backgrounds of people that you would come in contact with on an airplane, from the Hasidic Jews to the Amish to heads of states to dignitaries. There are things that you can and cannot do. There are people who might be on a flight that need to get up and pray, and you're facing the east, and so that was the one thing that I appreciate, that I've been around enough cultures of people to understand them, and if I'm not in understanding, be man enough to have a dialogue to say, now, wait, I don't want to offend anyone, but this is what I need to understand about your culture, your race, all of those things. And I just think that that's something that probably needs to be taught to our young people at some point in high school, or maybe when they go off to college, especially the times in which we're living in right now,
Right. Exactly.
This is the perfect time for that, because we've had a situation where we're so used to living with kind of a covering, this politically correct, you're okay, I'm okay, let's all get along. But that's a goal if it's a goal that's genuine and authentic, such as, I want to know more about you, and I want you to know more about me so that we can understand each other and live cohesively. But if we continue to have kind of the window dressing where there's not real authenticity in relationships, then we'll never break some of those barriers. I think we should be able to set the stage where someone can say, I don't understand you. Would you tell me more? Or I do have these biases from my background. This is what I have experienced. This is what I know. And obviously there's things I don't know. Can you lead me down that path so I can be more perhaps intelligent, more open-minded? Doesn't mean that a person necessarily has to change their belief systems, because we all are developed over time with certain belief systems. But what it does allow for them to be is more open-minded, more respectful. And that's all we really seek, is respect for one another. That's all we really seek, respect and fair treatment. And that, I think, would be the end result of any dialogue or interplay between groups of people that may not know that much about each other. So I hope that's what has happened from his interplay with the Jewish community and the rabbis.
Yes. Alicia, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, and I agree with what Carol's saying. In addition to that, what I'm thinking is this is the perfect time to talk about the Black and Jewish communities. And I know that's what he referenced in the articles. He said that he looks forward to having that voice. But just talking overall, because we know that there were Jewish brothers and sisters who were very much a part of the civil rights movement, as we referenced earlier, with people like Elder Congressman John Lewis, as well as Elder Reverend Vivian, who were a part of that movement, and therefore have stories to share. So this is the time, as we're in the Black Lives Matter movement, which is, continuation of our civil rights. And as Carol referenced, there are all kinds of hues, therefore nationalities, ethnicities, who are part of this movement. Now actually is the time to say, well, what was your role then? And what is your role now? And who are you? What is the history of your culture, your community? And then people can learn, about the different groups, and where they may come, where they come from, where it's assumed they come from, and and how we are actually connected. So I think this is a great time to have a deeper conversation. Nick, if you can do a documentary, referencing what you were actually, talking about what you were referencing perhaps, and then with the information that you have gained from the people that have been educating you since that time, and then other information that you're going to get as you do your research. We need that conversation. Like Carol said, that specific conversation of the Jewish community, the Black community, and our history as African people. People talk about the Hebrew Israelites, and just, I remember Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston. They were much a part of that, in the community, and so why don't we have that discussion?
Yes.
Why don't we get those answers now? And Nick, you're a TV personality. Lead the way.
That's right. I'm reminded. Yes, yeah. I'm reminded of my Jewish girlfriend, a very close friend, that called me after the murder of Mr. Floyd, and she had her voice was cracking. As she said to me on the phone in the morning, Carol, I just want you to know that I stand with Brianna, I stand with Sandra, and I stand with Black women like you in this season also. Yeah. And I was just touched by that. It was touching to me, not only that she stood with Mr. Floyd, but that she also wanted me to know that she had not shut her eyes to the circumstances that had impacted Black women as it related to issues with law enforcement and inequity. And so I agree with Alicia. We have a long history of working in cohesion with the Jewish community. And for things like this to occur, there's responsibility on both sides. And hopefully this is the launch pad for a powerful dialogue and mutual support, so that Mr. Cannon knows what occurred and why it was hurtful, and that those spiritual leaders can say, we extend the olive branch to you, brother, and we want you to thrive also.
Very good. I love it, ladies. I really do. We could go on and on about this conversation, but one of the things that we've got to correct are a lot of the ills within our own community. I just love and adore when I'm able to learn about other cultures, other people. One of the reasons why I chose to travel for a majority of my life. But now I want to talk about the colorism that happens within our own community. I want to talk about the fact that I think that colorism and the crabs in the barrel mentality go hand in hand. And the only reason why I feel that is as a young child sitting around my great grandmother's dining table, my grandmother's dining table, I heard things of if you're darker than this paper sack. Jigaboo, good hair, bad hair, just a lot of things that, has stuck in my mind over the years and was always told that my black is never going to be as beautiful as a fairer black. So first of all, ladies, can you help to define what is colorism and how it is looked at in our society today? Who wants to go first with that?
I'll start. Carol and I think Carol and I are not the only ones as Black women and Black people who talk about colorism continuously, because it is so prevalent in our public society and media, therefore communications, in our personal society. As it relates to education, you have several incidents that, we will talk about. It's so jarring. And it's a conversation that has continued. We know historically where it comes from. As a people of African descent in particular, we were called all kinds of names when we were brought to this country, the Native American country. And, in particular, I would say during the Atlantic slave trade, so much of that has shaped our mental and psychological wherewithal of who we see ourselves personally when we look in the mirror, who our own community see us as. I think about so many people, including Michael Jackson, as I think about the man in the mirror, and the things that he must have seen as we saw him changing over the years, and his skin tone changing. Understandably, there may have been a medical issue. I don't know, but I'm just using as an example. And then going further into our history, the things that people were in our community, and I think, Kat, you might have been referencing then the term that we called passing.
Passing.
Right. Nella Larson, she wrote a book back in the 1920s. Nella Larson was, coined and made popular during the Harlem Renaissance. And she wrote that book, Passing. It was a fictional, but really a biography of her own life as she was, a lighter skinned African American. There have been people within our society and our community during those times in the early 1900s, in the 1800s, who were of mixed race and or who had parents who were both parents were of lighter hue, who perhaps were of obviously of mixed race, who, when we think about the census, who actually, what people would say, they dropped out of the community because they were no longer counted in the census, because now they realized that, because of the skin tone, it was easier to pass, and therefore it was easier to write on, or, however the census documents were done during that time. And there were different ways to not be counted as Black, but to be counted as white. When you do your research, you see that this has happened to a lot of our families, and has happened to some of our, personally, some of our own families who may have chosen to do that in their lifetime. And that's, of course, because of the conditions that we face as African Americans, and not wanting to face, the treatment of being a person of African descent, because as we see even in 2020, what some of that treatment is. So that's, some of the things that that we want to talk about, and just, sharing a little bit from what Carol and I've been talking about over the past few days in particular, as we start going deeper into this conversation.
Yes. All right. I love it. And let me just say this about Michael Jackson. His condition was vitiligo, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was.
And here's the deal. My heart goes out to anyone who, has the condition. I know quite a few people. But where I side at Michael Jackson was, I've never met anybody with vitiligo and their hair was permed straight or pressed straight. I kind of wondered. I said, well, now, oh boy, now that his skin tone has changed, he got to change his hair too. And that's when I kind of side-eyed Michael Jackson a little bit. Not that, he had the skin condition, but just how, the cosmetic surgeries and all those things made me almost feel as if my black was not good enough for him anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically what I was referring to, is not the condition itself, but the different features that have changed, and knowing that he wasn't the only one that did those things. And I love Michael Jackson, including his family, and personal family members, that I'm familiar with, and respect, and therefore respect him. But within our society as a whole, we have seen things from many years ago until present, and I'll let Carol comment on some of these things as we go deeper into who some of those people were in history as it relates to media and so forth.
Go right ahead, Dr. Carol. Thank you for taking the floor.
A couple of things that come to mind, Chad, is I had an encounter probably about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, with an African-American dermatologist. And I asked the question about Michael Jackson and vitiligo. And what the dermatologist shared with me at that time is that in the overwhelming majority of cases of African people or other highly pigmented peoples who contract that particular disease, they choose to be repigmented. That was the terminology he used. He said, and this was 20 some years ago, he said that their choice is repigmentation. So the doctors attempt to bring in color back into their skin. He said, is it extremely rare that a person with that condition would go through a process of pulling out all of the melanin or causing the melanin not to be active, which is probably what occurred there with Mr. Jackson. So although I don't have proof of that, having had that experience with that African-American dermatologist kind of shed a little light on that. And gives us a little indicator of what might possibly have occurred there. So as we begin our dialogue on colorism, first we might want to just give thanks to a prolific writer and poetess, Alice Walker, who coined the term colorism. That is her term, colorism. And we also probably want to go back to the Willie Lynch letters and how color was used to control. So we know that the European slave owner, Willie Lynch, wrote the letters. The letters were to teach the white American slave owners how to control the slaves. And color was one way to control them. And thus we had the movement for the house Negro and the field Negro based on color. So color was very, very deeply embedded in this whole issue of chattel slavery with Black people. But we can't also forget that even amongst white peoples, colorism is active.
Yes, it is.
Reach back to the glorification of Marilyn Monroe and the idea of what constituted the all-American look, which became blonde-haired, blue-eyed, very white-skinned. It was not the Italian. It was not the Greek. It was not the Jewish person with perhaps more of a tan tone or darker hair. So the idea of colorism, although it's been extremely impactful for African Americans, is very clearly happening in Latin America, all right? Where statistically, I believe I'm going to say around 2015 and some research that I did using some statistics in 2015, overwhelmingly, almost 60% roughly, of most Latin Americans declare themselves as white racially. And we know that there's many, many Latin Americans with African blood. All right. And that flows the theme of color, hair texture, movies. I'll never forget the scene in one of my movies that I really enjoyed. It was a 90s movie. I think it was called I Like It Like That, where she was an Afro Puerto Rican, I believe. And she was marrying the son of Rita Moreno, who was a European looking Puerto Rican, more so. And I remember there was a line in there about what about the hair? What about the hair? As her son was falling for this Afro Puerto Rican, I believe the actress's name was Lauren Velez.
Yes.
So if you read up and you read and follow Zoe Saldana and some other notable actresses who are Latin women of African descent, you do still hear that notion of colorism very much existent in Latin America. When you even look at the words, and often African Americans I hear use the word fair. And I did my research on fair. And if you put the word fair and you begin to define it, fair is equitable, just, beautiful, light in color. I mean, those are some of the synonyms that go with the word fair. All right. When you go and you define the word dark, some of the synonyms that go with dark are gloomy, sinister, shady. All right. The absence of color. Now, my question is, when we take the color wheel and we put all the colors together, Chad and Alicia, what color does it come up to be? When we put red and blue and yellow and colors together, they come up dark. They come up as a dark color. So when we speak of dark skin being the absence of color, the absence of light is in the dictionary, as though there is no light when it is dark. And even if we look at biblical notions of what coming into the light, leaving the dark, this idea of color has just been totally saturated within our communities and within our particular race of people. And I think it leaves us to be very, very clearly aware of how damaging that can be. And as one of three children, my sisters are 10 and 14 years older than me, I'm the brownest and I'm the baby. And I remember my middle sister telling me, who's 10 years older than me, who's a lighter toned woman, in this spectrum of what light means in America. Because we tend to forget that. Are we counting our brothers and sisters from the Sudan? Is that what we call dark skin? Because if we were to call the Sudanese darker skin, then I would say most brown-skinned African Americans are considered lighter. But when we use another spectrum, which we use in this country, then we have a different definition for what light and dark means. But I remember being born, my sister said when I was born, she began to talk to me and tell me how beautiful I am. Because she said she knew, being born into the world when she was born, which is in the 50s, she knew how strong colorism existed. And so she thought it was her project to look at her brown. She told me, my brown, beautiful baby sister, and teach me to love my brown skin, because she knew, even though she was lighter, that this was a demon, so to speak, that was very strongly existent in this society. And she did not want me to grow up thinking because I was browner, that meant that I was not as attractive. So families have dealt with it the way they dealt with it. But the unfortunate thing I think today is it is still very much alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's questionable.
Yes, a dear friend of mine shared a story with me that it was either his grandmother or great-grandmother, and this was the late 30s, 40s, so I'm thinking it was probably the great-grandmother, that again came from a household where there were a set of daughters that were light, fair, beautiful, and then there was the darker, more dark featured type of sisters, not, that they weren't beautiful, but that the father would encourage and entice the more beautiful girls to go seek out things that would get them husbands quicker than the darker daughters. We saw that in The Color Purple as well with Nettie and Celie. And you know, and we've seen this story time and time again. And I've had people share with me endless stories of, you know, because my aunt so-and-so was more fair complected and looked better, she was able to get better jobs, where my darker aunt just all of a sudden had to fall into being a domestic worker because she was so dark. And that's frightening, but a lot of that is still how we live in this day and age, correct?
Yes. It's correct. It is still how we live in currently. You know, as I reference the young girl, Karis Rogers, she shared her story when I think it was the first grade she had the experience of facing discrimination and judgment because of the color of skin when she was in school. And needless to say, you know, one of the stories that she shared is she remembered at one point sitting in the bathtub longer than usual so that she could see if her skin tone would get lighter. This interview she had was in 2017. And she's sharing this to say how damaged she was. At that time, I believe in 2017, she was 10. So it was what, 3 or 4 years prior where she had that experience in first grade. And you know, that when I read that, and I've been, you know, followed her a bit over since that time, you know, I am so disheartened by the fact that we still have that issue within our community, and therefore, of course, outside of our community, as a result of what others have said and put upon us, you know. And so therefore we have you know, institutionalized ourselves. We have this intra-racism, if you will. You know, so for example, when Spike Lee did his movie School Days, you know, you remember the sororities that he was depicting in there. There was the light complexion sorority, the darker complexion sorority, and the song, the Jigaboo song.
Yes.
Saying, you're just a jigaboo and I'm better than you, right? And the reason why, you know, he and then they were in, I believe they were in a hair shop. So at that time, therefore, he was also showing it wasn't just about our skin tone, but it's also therefore about our hair, you know, and showing that, oh, you know, straighter hair is more accepted, or, you know, relaxed hair. And the truth of the matter is, all hair should be accepted. I know Claire and I both have worn all kinds of hairstyles in our young years, right? You know, because we can as Black women. So I think that we, in particular, as Black women, that is what we need to receive. That it's our skin tone, where people are various different hues. Our hair texture are various different textures. You know, I started out on the show a couple weeks ago. I had the twist out, braid, twist it out, and go. Now, you know, today I just straighten it with the little flat comb thing, right? We can do that, and we need to embrace who we are and not judge each other one way or the other, not for the color of our skin and not for the hair texture and what we do with our hair texture. And you know, that comes from someone, as far as hair texture is concerned, who actually, you know, when I was deep into my locks wearing and I was vegetarian, I was 100% natural, I thought I would not go into a salon where they were doing perms and relaxers. You know, I was natural for 20 years until I took a break, and now going natural again because of COVID. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Right. But the thing is that also, therefore, was not fair, you know, the way that I was, because I said, oh, I didn't want to be in a salon where, you know, sisters are you know, relaxing their hair and putting chemical in their hair to get their hair straight, you know, because I was locked out. You know, I had my locks, you know, my locks at the time, but that wasn't fair either. So we need to, right, exactly like your beautiful locks, okay? And so we need to start all of us, you know, again, going back to the movie, that's what Spike was trying to show in School Days. he was trying to show, yes, we're discriminating against dark-skinned people, but light-skinned, people don't need to be discriminated against either. We're all hues. Look at us, all three of us right now on this conference. So, and then, but then you still have stories. School Days was what, in the late 90s when he came out with that movie, but you still have cases recently, 2017, 15, 18, 20, 2020, where, I think everyone remembers when the young man, the athlete in his high school, he was asked to cut his hair at practice or before a game, and he allowed them to cut it right then and there. And as I was reading and doing some research, he had a cousin that experienced the same thing recently. And that was just 2-3 years ago.
And that's crazy.
That's crazy. And then if, doing, understanding even more and hearing more stories, there have been kids from 1st grade, 5th grade, who have been asked to take out your braids and or sent home and or given detention at such a young age. So what are you doing to our youth at that age? You are conditioning their minds and you're breaking their systems down to believe that they are not accepted unless they do go and look a certain way that you think is acceptable. So, thank God that now, and thank God, yet unfortunately, now we have an act. It's called the Crown Act. And it relates to hair. And our country had to put out an act to say, you can't discriminate against someone's hair in the workplace. Like and many states have adopted this act, but they've changed, the vernacular based on the state and whomever was, editing the law and the act at that time. But in California in particular, they were the first ones to say they were going to institute this act in their state. This was in 2019. And it just became valid in January 2020. And their act states that you can't discriminate against hair in housing. I mean, believe it or not, housing. And as well as employment, and then therefore, of course, as well as education. And now we have several states, including our own here in Illinois, my other state, New York, who have adopted the act and have modified it based on what they believe their needs are. I mean, because, New York City, the mayor's had his wife and his children, they're wearing their natural black hair, it's a thing, and it's unfortunate. It's such a thing that we actually had to have a law to stop people from discriminating what we look like. We as Black people of different hues and different hair textures. And that is an illness that we need to continuously work through, because if states are doing it like California, they're saying they're doing it for employment, housing, and education, therefore it's hitting every sector. And that's a psychological, we've got to continue to work on what has been happening.
Right. Well, ladies, I think about the first time I was a flight attendant, the hairstyle I have now would never, ever fly. Late 80s, early 90s, it had to be a crew cut. It had to be short crop. When the curl came into play, it could be curly here in the top, but it had to be faded on the sides. When I fly now and see flight attendants with braids and dreads, and they're still to me very conservative. It makes my heart feel good. But then I do have to play the devil's advocate, like Debbie Green says. Some of these people in these hairstyles are so damn outlandish that I'm sitting there looking at your head more than paying attention to what you're saying. And so I think we've lost a lot too in our hair and not making our crown and jewel. Our ancestors, our grandparents and parents, whether they had whatever it is, they wasn't walking around looking like fools by the head. And major networks would not let me look like this. And now they might would, because it's a conservative lock that I have. But they're very funny too, because they want you to have that pristine anchor look, and dreads and locks wouldn't fly, or nappy hair wouldn't fly.
I think we need to also think about what Alicia, what you shared. It's so important that we recognize the depth of colorism. Very subconscious. People judge people by their aesthetics. Often the aesthetics do not constitute, are your eyes set nicely apart? Do you have a nice button nose? How are your lips shaped? Aesthetics often boil down to what's your complexion. And then it back maps from that. If your complexion is something that is seen as the complexion that is favored, whatever that is for whatever group of people, then that constitutes your beauty, not your actual facial formation, features, personality, spirit, etc., which is unfortunate. All right. And I'm saying that it's not a judgment on whether a person's considered lighter, whatever that means. And I keep saying that, team, because if a person is from the Nordic countries, their skin tone may have a hue that's different than perhaps a European from Southern Italy. So that's a concept of light and dark. I think we here in the African American community forget that. There's research that indicates the vast majority of African Americans, I'm going to say over 80%, could even be more, already have mixed blood due to the experience of chattel slavery. So the concept of who's light, who's dark, who's biracial, who's 1/4 white, there's so many variations within African Americans. Also, often our Caribbean brothers and sisters. So many variations in how genes have come together that there's no telling what is in each of us, other than the fact that we know African is in each of us. And so therefore that comes into different hair textures, different skin tones. People can be a very light hue and have tightly coiled African hair. People can be a very dark hue and have a straighter texture of hair. So there's so many different combinations. The question is, why are we still on it?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we still on the ignorance as a community? Because we could start by saying that it is a manifestation of white supremacy. It is. Right. All right. When we think about, if we were to go back, there's an excellent book, These Distant Shores, by the late researcher Ron Takaki, where there may have been a couple of essays, one I recall, where he talks about what it was like when the Europeans first came to Africa. So imagine the 1400s and imagine Europe at that time. Imagine the affect, the way the Europeans dressed, the Western Europeans. Imagine coming to the distant shore of Africa, seeing these brown, shining bodies in minimal clothing in the tropical climate, a total contrast there. So from day one, color was right at the front. Whiter skinned Europeans with more stoic outfits from that era, from the 1400s, were arriving in Africa and seeing just the opposite. So yes, color came into play. Immediately, the idea of hair texture came into play. And Chad, I think all three of us, Chad, Alicia, and I, we've all locked. Chad, you're currently locked. Even the term dreadlock. So some people have not embraced that because dreadful locks, dreadful coils, went back to the Scottish and some of the other colonized when they first saw them with many of our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean and Africa, seeing the so-called dreadful coils or dreadful locks. So when you think about that whole contrast that occurred with this continent meeting that continent, color was right off the bat. The comparison of features became right off the bat. And I think, Alicia, you spoke to it before. Venus Hottentot, Sarah Bartman, I think we spoke about that. The idea of the black body, the curves were very different from what was coming out of Europe. So there was this contrast that occurred. And then when you put that into the whole context of subjugation, slavery, All right. Then you automatically have what? These pecking orders, this hierarchy of what is better than what is better than what. Now, the key is for our lighter tone brothers and sisters who fell under the mulatto or the quadroon or the octoroon category, they were demonized, they were disrespected. And having a conversation recently with a woman who was of mixed heritage who considered herself Black, and she said, I'm African American, but I am of mixed heritage. We talked about that very recently. And she said, was there really a difference? What happened to me in the house? What happened to you in the field, Carol? We were both demonized, disrespected, and damaged in both places, right? So therefore, for us to carry it on as though some group had a level of what? Favor, we need to really retract and ask ourselves, is that true? What favor could be in trying to pass, living a lie, knowing that if you're found out, you're dead, or your whole world is turned upside down? What favor could be in that? All right. What favor could be in looking in the mirror and knowing that, especially in a slave system, as you saw your Black mother in the field and she was dark skinned, looking at yourself and knowing that you were the product of that mother, but you didn't look like her in that system. How much dishonor could that bring to someone in that system? So we need to think about, as Leisha talked about a lot, the historical implications of what that meant. And so hopefully today, as we deal with colors in the beautiful mosaic of what it means to be Black, full of different colors, we can own and celebrate every hue instead of creating continually to create these hierarchies, which only further allow for what? Belief system that Black is inferior. Because if we're judging ourselves against this skin color is better than this skin color, then inherently we're saying that Black is inferior, regardless of what percentage exists within a person. And I would hope that would not be where we are today in this part of our evolution. I hope we be beyond that.
Wow. Well, ladies, there's so much to talk about this. I want to interject this really quick. And Alicia, I'm going to let you pop in. I know somebody who said to me, I was destined to be a womanizer. And I said, you were destined to be a womanizer? I don't understand. I come from good stock. My mother and father were from Louisiana, so they were lighter, great hair, great characteristics, things like that. And I said, now that's deep to me. But then when I listen to Beyonce's song, and she, my mama's Miss Tina Creole, mixed with that Bama. And I look at how, again, this is my friend saying to me, oh, I was built to be a womanizer because the stock in which it came from has given me all these gifts and women cannot resist me. And I said, wow, I never thought of that. And somebody else said, oh, no, I know somebody else whose family kind of felt that way. Where you were from, how you look, what that mixture was all about is what kind of made you who you were. And I said, well, hell, I'm out of luck. I just come from regular old Negro. You have to try to, it's sad that people look at themselves like that. Alicia, what were you going to say?
Yeah, wow. I want to comment on what you said, but I'll get to that in a second. But wow. To kind of piggyback on what Carol was saying, personal story. I remember when I was in undergrad out in New York, one of the SUNY schools, and in my English class with my professor, she was an African-American woman. We were learning all kinds of things about the African-American community and the African diaspora at large in that class. And the school wasn't too far from Harlem. And I remember she gave us an assignment and she wanted us to go research. She said, I actually want you all to go in teams and do some research at the Schomburg Center in Harlem. And all of a sudden, one of my classmates, this white woman, started crying. And we all, kind of looked up like, okay, is she afraid to go to Harlem? And like, what's wrong? And she ended up explaining was she was overwhelmed at the fact that she had never been into an all-Black community like Harlem, but what she was more overwhelmed with is the fact that she realized she now had to tell the truth about who she was. And who she was a young woman whose mother was white and whose father was African American. And she never told anyone up to that point. And she was very emotional. Of course, it was great, great time to comfort her, talk to her with her, ask her if she had questions, etc. So the class and the teacher, we handle it, I believe well, embracing her. And so therefore we still have this passing thing. And when people find out who they are, obviously they become very emotional. They can about that. I know someone just told me about a story, an article of this woman who found out that her mother was mixed Black. She didn't know that because her mother would go to bed every night with makeup on. So her father didn't know she was Black either.
I know a story like that. I do. I know a story like that. Yep.
So you still have these stories, and these are modern day stories, and so therefore this psychological thing is continuing. And, as Kara referenced earlier, it's international. And up until now, or, who were the people that was feeding media to the world, the TV shows, the movies, and the various different images at large? Which country was doing that? This country. So if we're the ones that are feeding media and on these various different mediums, what were those images that were being shown all over the world? Perhaps could that be one of the major issues in addition after slavery that continue to instill in people's mind, in their psyche, this colorism issue around the world, for people to not appreciate their hue, whether they're in northern Italy or southern Italy, whether they're a Moor or not a Moor, right? All of these images that have continued to allow people to believe that their skin is not beautiful. Their hair texture, their facial features are not accepted. When, again, as we've referenced many times on our shows together, whether it was on the radio or here, we are the majority in the world. We are and have been. And why? As several people have noted, some of our white brothers and sisters have noted, researchers, newscasters have noted and have done documentaries just for people who just didn't know. We came from the same area as far as we know scientifically at this point. And that was where? In the quote unquote dark continent. So we've got to work on our psychological stuff within all of our communities, in our community in particular. But now, therefore, we have to continue to raise the bar on the images that we show, and therefore that go out into the world. I mean, everyone is watching TV, whether it's whatever channels you do, Netflix, Hulu, Prime, etc. There are all kinds of movies now, and some of them are movies. They're from all various different countries, and I watch some of them and I'm seeing the images of some of, our Latina and Latino brothers and sisters. And and I know from friends and family about the struggle some of them have had with the color of their skin and their hair texture, and hearing some of the things that they have said that were psychologically damaging, I know, for themselves as well as for their children. We've got to start accepting who we are. But one of the ways that we can do it, because we want to figure out, how do we do that? How do we psychologically deal with that? We research, we do the history, we look at the people, for example, who is the actress? I can't remember her first name, but her last name is Washington, the white woman in Imitation of Life, whose mother was the Black actress.
Yes.
You know, in Imitation of Life, the story was that she had the Black mother and she was ashamed of her Black mother. Well, that actress in real life was actually of mixed heritage. And she was one that was an advocate for actors and actresses in her community back then, you know, when she was a part of the movie Imitation of Life. You know, but there are others like Manning, Mrs. Manning, who didn't come out until she was 90 something in the you know, mid 2000s, and said that, oh, well, you know, I am mixed heritage, and perhaps the way that I sing and dance is because I'm Black. You know, so there are a lot of psychological things that we have to contend with. We have to know those stories. We have to hear those stories. Wonder Woman. What's her name? Oh gosh, the name.
Linda Carter, as in Linda Carter, that Wonder Woman.
Linda Carter. Yes, I'm sorry. The one that we know of from our childhood, right?
Right.
She's Mexican.
Oh.
Right.
I never knew that.
She's Mexican. Well, we know from our childhood when she came out. So, of course, wanting to pass was more acceptable for her at that time than actually identifying with who she was as a Mexican sister. So we have to look and know these stories of these people who have accepted their color, like Ms. Washington during Imitation of Life, and therefore was on the forefront. And then others like Linda Carter, who did not, because she was afraid.
Yes.
And we have to deal with those stories. We have to tell those stories. And then, therefore, that's tearing the Band-Aid off. And then we can go ahead and say, but wait a second, where are we all from? So therefore, of course, there are going to be various groups of us who are just all different kinds of colors, all different facial features. Our hair texture is going to be different, and we can change it if we want to, and that's okay. You know, as long as it's not, we're changing it because we don't want to look a certain way or be a certain way, you know, as we know, some of our sisters and brothers have done, you know, because, you know, we have people in China, brothers, you know, Chinese men who were going to the salon and getting their hair chemically changed so they can have locks that look like yours, Chad.
That's right. That's right. Today, while I was dining al fresco, my date and I, we saw something that we had never seen. Well, she had never seen before, but I had seen it in Dubai. Was Asian Muslims, and the women had on hijabs, and you know, and she said, "Oh, I've never seen that before." And I said, well, believe it or not, I've seen it over in Dubai, some parts of, you know, the Middle East. But, you know, what people don't realize is that, you know, you have people of all backgrounds who worship or are part of, as you would say, various Sikhs or, you know, their religious orders or whatever the case may be. But I said to her today, I said, yeah, you know, actually in places like Dubai, I've seen that, but not much in the United States. It was an Asian Muslim family that was having dinner today or lunch today at the establishment.
Right. And see, that's why we have to connect ourselves more to the world, because we are connected and understanding who we are. Because something like that, whether we've experienced it or seen it before or not, you know, won't be a surprise. And this is when, of course, we get to the education within our curriculums and opening those doors up more as well.
Yes. Well, ladies, real quick, somebody said that Carol Channing was also somebody that a lot of people, Watika said that Carol, you remember Carol Channing was somebody we didn't necessarily know. She was a sister girl passing, that type of thing. Tracy Woods, thank you so much. A great job talking about some of the films. Ladies, we next Monday is our last and closing discussion. We'll table some of the rest of that discussion for next week. You've done a great job. Can you believe we've been talking for over 2 hours now? Can you believe that?
No.
Can you believe that? Dr. Carol, I'm going to let you give your closing thoughts on what we've just been talking about, as well as any closing thoughts for the evening. And then we'll continue on with the boss, Miss Ross. All right, go right ahead, Dr. Carol.
Yes, I'm going to share that. There's several studies out there. One was done in 2013 that indicated that within Black girls, darker Black girls are given harsher punishments and school discipline issues. Yeah. Also, there's a study, sociologist Hunter, that she did with Mexican Americans regarding colorism. Darker skinned Mexican Americans have less opportunity, less education. If you look at the color scheme, you can see that often the darker skinned Mexican Americans are in the military, on the hierarchy in terms of economic wealth. Look at the novellas, where you see often the protagonists, the main characters are whiter skinned, more European looking Mexicans versus those that are doing these secondary roles. All right, so colorism, calling that out, kind of looking at our Latin American brothers and sisters, I think is important, especially as the largest group coming into the United States at this time. The issue of color is very much deeply rooted in those communities. And looking back at African Americans, we know our story. So we know that it exists. The question is, how long are we gonna keep it going? You know, I'm still hearing team light skin, team dark skin. Now we have our own local jokes and things of that nature, which are funny, but are they funny? Do we still dictate based on what we think is an acceptable standard? And in doing so, I think we undermine our worth as a group of people. So if people are still judging a person who's lighter and saying, you think you're better, that's wrong. They have no basis to do that. Just because a person's skin is lighter, that means they are then what? Justifying that light skin means you have the right to act better than someone who's dark. Therefore, a lighter skinned person must think they're better. That's very stereotypical. So I say that in support of our lighter skinned brothers and sisters. If a person is saying about a darker skinned person that they're not as attractive, yet they haven't even looked at their features, or they couldn't possibly be getting that job with their hair and that texture, this, that, and the other, we're only simply compounding upon our own misery. And I have to say, Chad and Alicia, that it is still very much existent. And I would say to parents out there that it might be important to try to work through some of those sicknesses as a community, as Black people. I think there's some cross-cultural conversations being had. I've had many conversations with some of my white colleagues about race and colorism. I think more Blacks need to have it amongst themselves so that we can turn it around. This is not really for white folks to do. This is a Black thing. And Black people need to turn it around themselves. Or if not, continue to go down that path of self-hate, because that's ultimately what it is.
You know what, Dr. Carol, I just love and adore you, because whenever I say, listen, this is something that Black folks need to handle, people get upset, they get mad, how dare you? That we need to just base a whole show off of that, because really there's been a couple of people on this show who have said, listen, we need to handle our own damn business before we let the world handle our business, because there are some ills and things that we do that are, I'm working on something now to present that in a way that it's not offensive to my own race of people, but we can learn from it. But then we also can, you know, let the world know that not all of us think that way either. And it solely was based off of the 3 girls clowning at the Fort Lauderdale airport because their flight was delayed, and they wanted to whoop all the gate agents' butts because the flight was delayed. And again, that took a whole race of people down 300 years to me, that y'all would cut up and clown in an airport because a flight is delayed with your ghetto butts, and now you on the no-fly list. So you'll be on great.
You have great love for Chad. You have great love for Black people. I have great love for Black people. Alicia has great love for Black people. And because we love Black people, we expect the best. And when you, just like any other community that loves their culture and loves their race and heritage, they expect the best. And what it means is that we have to expect the best from us. And if that means we have to ask ourselves, do we need to fix some things then that's what we do when we're expecting the best. And that could mean join in, as even at this time that we look at some of the social change that we're experiencing. It's not anyone else's job to lead the charge. We have to ask ourselves what needs to be done so that we can get equity and access the way we believe we need to. And we have to lead our charge, welcoming our other brothers and sisters of all hues to walk with us. But it's not their role to lead our charge. It's our role to lead our charge. And as it comes to loving ourselves in all hues, all body sizes, all skin tones, all hair textures, that's our charge. Because now we see plenty of images of beautiful Black people, all sizes, shapes, hair textures, accents, persuasions, lifestyle choices. We've got so many that there's no reason for any of us to believe that we can't find someone that we can say, hey, I like them and I want to be like them in my own person. So it's not where we're only looking at Lena Horne anymore. All right, she was a great legend, but we're not looking at her. Oh, there's too many options for anyone to say that they can't find someone that they feel that they can honorably look at and say, hey, that's a role model for me. So I think those days are over, and we as a community have to take responsibility. I mean, I look at myself as a brown skin, I choose to wear my hair natural, full-figured Black woman. I see many images out there that I can say, that's beautiful. And of course, the prime image I see is when I look in the mirror and look at myself. But anybody who's struggling, there are too many images to say that we can't. And so I would say that it will be our role, whether it's as teachers, principals, community members, friends of us, of all of our folks, just anybody to say, up ye mighty race. Take a look at yourself, love yourself. But if we choose to carry on the narrative of negativity and divisiveness, then I think we will all definitely lose. And that would be a travesty.
You know, Dr. Carol, I gotta say this. You just gave us all a big old hug. I feel as if you drew me in like when we were in the studio and gave me one of them good old bosom hugs. And that's what I felt as if you just delivered to all of us in this statement. It's one of them hugs of comfort. This is what we have to do. And I just love you for that. I really do.
And I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, that was a hug. That was a hug you gave us all. Alicia, let's get your closing thoughts and sentiment on all of this. Oh, and by the way, ladies, when we go to lunch eventually, when we do our alfresco dining, I'll give y'all that whole story about that coming from good stock and the womanizer thing. So I got to because that's a whole nother show. I got to tell you all the whole dynamics, and there were other people who said their lives were based on that as well too.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? Let's get your closing thought.
That is interesting, and I'm still blown away by that comment and realize I didn't address it directly, but I think I'm gonna have to wait until after our lunch. So right. I'm still blown away by that. Yes, Carol, thank you for the hug. I felt it. When your body just starts to relax, like you just get there, it was amazing. And so thank you, because that is what we need, right? We need that in our community. We need those hugs from words. So, if we need hugs from words and therefore authenticity, as Carol has shared, then what are those words that we're saying that makes us feel tense? It makes us feel some kind of way, even if it may seem like it's endearing, but it's been damaging through the generations because the person on the other end receiving it is saying, well, I'm not red bone, I'm not black of the cherry, the sweet of the juice. So perhaps, what we can do is within our own communities, within our own homes, within our own families, we've used these words, these phrases and terms. Stop saying the black of the berry, the sweet of the juice, red, look at that red bone. I want some of that red bone. I want to, and all that stuff. That's not cute. It really isn't. It's not cute. It's not appreciated. And it makes someone feel some kind of way. It doesn't give you that hug. it makes you feel tense, because I'm sure I just changed the whole mood just now by saying it, because many of us, including the three of us, are probably like, yeah, that's right. You know, cousin so-and-so, auntie, uncle, mama, whatever. You know,
so now you gonna make me get rid of my sweet blackberry t-shirt that I wear. I have a t-shirt that says, yes, this juice is really sweet. I digress, ladies. Okay.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But the actual term, the blacker the berry, you know what I'm saying? The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. Yes, that's true. And I understand, we all understand where it comes from. But then you got the red bone, you know, and light skin. Look at that light skin, you know, and people calling those names out still. And we pass it on and pass it on and pass it on from generation to generation. Just stop. That's something simple. Just don't even. Why do you have to identify? Or then there is. Look at that nappy hair. Why you do something with that kitchen right there? You need to do something with your kitchen. Your kitchen is hanging, but you know.
Right. Look, I'm like, okay, tomorrow. Right. We're in trouble. Right.
Right. But we have all of these terms, right, within our community that we can laugh about. Like Carol said, some of it is funny. And we sit around with our family and our friends and we reminisce, you know, and then all of a sudden we start, you know, using that vernacular. But what we're not realizing, as we were when we were kids, is there's a kid listening to it in 2020. And so they're repeating it again, repeating it. And it's just going over and over. As Carol said, we have to stop. It has to stop. And we have to stop with ourselves. You know, we have to do it within our own community. And, you know, and I know I have a friend, you know, I talked to my friend about some of the movies that we used to have to sit down, you know, quote unquote, have to, you know, as we were growing up. You know, Eyes on the Prize. I know you can sing the song. Go ahead. Eyes on the Prize. Oh Lord. You know, remember Black History Month? We had to sit down and watch Eyes on the Prize. What did that do though? That helped us to learn about our history. Thank God for PBS during that time, right? And now even, you know, and then there was Roots. Remember Roots? You know, some watched it when it first came out. Some of us watched the reruns, right? But we still watched it during Black History Month. Let's get back to watching movies together. We are in COVID-19 life lockdown, shutdown. Yes, we can do al fresco, but we still have to come home, right? So you got Netflix, you have Hulu, you have Prime, Amazon Prime. They actually literally have categories now called Black Lives Matter. And that's where you can find movies like School Days, or you can find documentaries, you know, like Richard Wright's documentary, you know, and which has actually been helpful for me because as you reference, chat, yes, that's actually part of what this is part of these conversations are things I'm writing for my dissertation right now, you know, because I'm writing about what is passionate to me, you know, and wanting to know about the history, our history, and then therefore trying to come up with solutions. And as I do it globally. And that is what I'm writing about. And that's why all of this is passionate for me, because of who I am, because of who we are, but because, you know, and as Carol has done in her research and continues to do, you know, we want to continue to tell the story. And the story doesn't change. We just add on as we continue to go through all these changes, thankfully so, in our current events. For example, we are so grateful that you took off Aunt Jemima, y'all. Okay, thank you for taking down the Aunt Jemima pictures and the Uncle Ben's. And by the way, I love that Uncle Ben, that gentleman, he was a worker here in Chicago. Right. That's who the picture was. But how long ago was that? And what is he depicting? You know?
And did his family ever make any money off of his image after all? You know what I'm saying? These are all things that we need to look at over the course of time. And that all deals with reparations, just a lot of different things that we need to look at. Our imagery, have we been paid fair for? I mean, us, it's just so many things, so many
things. And we have to talk about it within our own communities. But those of you who are listening, who have the power, the financial power, who have the education, who have, the power in government, change it, because someone else just changed Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima. So why don't you get out and now use your voice? Because now is the time to make those changes. We can sit here and we will talk all day long, but we're going to ask you to be a part of the solution and part of these changes that are happening. And speaking of reparations, there's a town in North Carolina that just received reparations. And did we know that Rosewood, that movie, Rosewood, Florida, they actually received their reparations several years ago? What reparations is different for everybody, I believe. I was talking with a friend earlier, Jack Daniels. I don't drink it, but I know some, people do. Jack Daniels was made by a brother. Did his family get those proceeds?
Right.
They did get something, but now that company realizes and said recently he has to do more. I do not condone violence. I do not condone the looting, but there are changes that are happening with these protests and people standing up of all hues on our behalf, because we are part of this American society, this American fabric, and we basically are the backbone. And changes are happening. We have to do our research and say, okay, these changes are happening now. What can I do? Where is my part? I'm gonna jump on this and I'm gonna move forward. What is my part? And someone just wrote, Asheville, North Carolina, apologize for slavery. You have, is it Yale and Princeton, who are offering scholarships to the descendants of the slaves that built those institutions. Things are happening. Things are happening. There's more that needs to be done. Just again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, just like Elder Congressman John Lewis has been trying to get the Voting Rights Act reconstructed over and over. It needs to be changed. It needs to be done now. And yes, put it in his name. And then let's actually make it a law, because I don't want to having to talk about this and having to visit it. That's just, that's
all right. Well, ladies, this has been an incredible show. People are still watching, following us, but unfortunately, my bladder has a 2-hour limit. I'm getting to that age now where we got to wrap. Actually, we've been talking now for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I love you both. I really do. The audience is loving. People are still connecting and joining us. I want to table all of this until next Monday night for our final discussion for Hotter Than July. I may have to bring July back again in September, because we don't know what's going to happen in September, and we may need to relive all of this again. Ladies, thank you. Great job tonight. Everybody's just been saying what wonderful feedback. Another wonderful show. Let me put the comments up here. Tracy says, at Alicia D. Ross, you were dealing with your own, with our young minds. I can only imagine the stories you've heard. And I agree as well, too. Dr. Carol, all of your years in academics, I can imagine you've heard some stories as well, too. Our co-host for tomorrow night says, another profound conversation with these incredible women. I could not agree more. They are incredible. And Watika, last but not least, said, great show tonight as well, too. Let me put her comment up there. You ladies knocked it out the ballpark as always, and I'm just happy and honored. Coming up on tomorrow night's show, Leslie McKinney will be here as our guest co-host. He is the director of BY's Black Women in Science and Engineering. She's not engineering. She's not been here with us in a while, and I'm excited to welcome her back tomorrow evening. And then my former co-host, who helped me to start this digital media show, security expert Javonda Lynn Dunnigan, will be here tomorrow night. And we're going to talk about all of the uptick in crime we've been having in our neighborhoods in Chicago. A lot of carjackings that are being done by young people, a lot of people not paying attention to their surroundings. So as you guys all know, when Javonda Lynn stops by tomorrow night, she will definitely cover all things security to help keep us safe and protected. And then last but not least, because we all need some energy healing in our lives. World-renowned energy healer and best-selling author Marla Goldberg will stop by. She has a new journal entitled My Sacred Journal, and this journal is to help you to pull it all together right now. A lot of people are still suffering with anxiety, depression, unemployment is at an all-time high. People are stuck in relationships that they don't want to be stuck in anymore. A lot of people are very fearful about going back into office settings. And so Marla will be here tomorrow night to help us to kind of get it all together and the power of learning to heal from our own energy. And I'm very much into that as well, too. I want to remind everybody to please wash your hands. Please do whatever you can to wash your hands. I think that the spreading of this virus is the fact that so many people are so damn nasty and don't wash their hands as often as they should. Also, wear your mask. Be like Chat Daddy, y'all. They didn't cost me a lot. Get you a bunch of cute masks. Make sure you matching. Wear your mask. Protect yourself as well as other people. Remember, social distancing is important. I know you guys want to get out and enjoy a meal and be with your friends. Keep it small. Keep it intimate. Know who you're around. If you know somebody that's always hacking, coughing, and ain't feeling well and all of that, honey, you don't need to be around them. And they don't need to be around you. Get around people who have been taking care of themselves and staying healthy, and do the right things so that we can move forward, because this is not going to get any better, you guys. It's not. Ladies, all right, real quick, anything else you want to say to the wonderful people?
Thank you.
Oh, that's it. Y'all, right. Y'all got to go to the bathroom like I do too, I think. Yeah, that's what it is. Right. Ladies, I love you so very much. Always a pleasure. And let me say this about both of you ladies. You ladies have become more fabulous each show. You have. You have. I just love it. Right. Fabulous is what you both are. But what I love more than anything, you're just beautiful, intelligent women who have so much to offer to our people and the world. And I thank God for introducing me to both of you. Just incredible. Yay. All right. Well, with that being said, I feel like this was a flight to Las Vegas, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and we're ready for arrival. So please put your seat backs and tray tables in their upright lock position. If you bought any carry-on luggage on board tonight, we ask that you please store it away in the overhead compartment or underneath the seat in front of you. Please make sure your seatbelts are securely fastened. We'll come around and collect anything that you want to discard. And thank you for joining the Real Chat Daddy Show tonight with my two amazing flight attendants. I'm just claiming it, Dr. Alicia L. Ross and Dr. Carol Collins Ayalaja. And these two women are just great. I love them. Could talk to them forever. Don't forget to visit therealchatdaddy.com, therealchatdaddy.com. That's where you can support me as well as find out more information about myself. I'll be back tomorrow night with your Tuesday night show. These two wonderful ladies will be back Monday night to close out their series with me. And what are we calling it? Worldwise. Worldwise. That's what it is. Yeah. Worldwise. I got it. I do. I love you both. Have a great night. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Here's somebody else said this show it informs and entertains as well. That's right. That's what we have to do. Oh, and Alicia, you put I love it. Keep it real, Chat Daddy. That's what we got to do, y'all. We got to keep it real. All right. That's the McKinney Love Tonight show as well, too. All right. I love you guys. Let me go on. I'm an old man with a short bladder now. I love y'all. Good night.
Love you both.
All right. One second. Let's end the broadcast.